This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the renewed, in some ways brand new, Unregistered podcast. And let me say a few things about my beloved Unregistered podcast. I began it in April of 2017, so that's now 7.5 years. And the show then was interviews, one-on-one interviews with people, and it was audio only. This was before the pandemic, and so we were still doing things in person. It was a lovely time. And that, in my whole career, from the PhD to the books to the articles that I've written, the teaching I've done, that podcast is the thing I am most proud of. I think it is still my best work in some ways. And I am very, very glad I did it. And I am very grateful to all my guests over the years who revealed things that they didn't reveal anywhere else. And I think we, in just about every interview, we broke new ground and created new ideas based on their work and my interactions with it. And it was the most satisfying professional experience of my life doing that podcast. Then, of course, COVID happens. We were all forced to go online. And that actually did increase my audience just because everyone was online, I think. But I also was forced to move to Zoom as the mode of interviewing. And that began in 2020, as with most other podcasts. And it has been that way ever since. And I still love the podcast. I think they did a lot of great work in there. Because of the new format, there was less of the personal interactions, less of the biographical explorations that I did when I was one-on-one in person with people. And then it began in the last year or two to move just more strictly into politics, and in particular geopolitics, with the war in Gaza starting, which I felt was an emergency. And I found it nearly impossible to talk publicly about other political issues over the last year. And so I devoted my podcast for a year to that, to having people on who illuminated what that war is really all about and to seek an end to it. That sort of petered out about 5 or 6 months ago. And I started to rethink what to do with the podcast. It seemed like it had reached a fork in the road. Wasn't sure what to do with it, what direction to go in. And in the meantime, I and the staff at Unregistered Academy have been building over the last many months new courses, new trailers for the courses, new formatting on the website, and planning new courses. And in the course of those discussions, we decided that the best way to go with Unregistered, because this is what I want to do now. I want to return to my academic and scholarly roots. I was a professor, I was an academic for 25 years. And that's really what I did. I didn't do journalism. I originally wanted to be a journalist when I was very young, but took the academic route and didn't look back until I was forced to leave academia and go out on my own. So now I am wanting to return up, having been in the news, involved in the news, in current politics, often sort of at the center of political issues, in fact, over the last many years, which was very exciting. I am tired of it. And I'm tired of the tone, in particular, of American politics. Not so much the tone. I'm actually really tired of the vacuity of it, the lack of historical knowledge and intelligence, the lack of curiosity. I don't mean just the partisanship. I mean people, for the most people who do politics professionally in the media, are simply not very learned or interesting to those of us who actually study. And so I want to come back, and this is why I renewed Unregistered Academy, and have been adding more courses and adding more students, because I want to return to that as my primary mode of work and engagement with the public. Now, I always want to be linked to the news, to politics, because I'm a political person and because I care about what's happening, obviously, especially when it pertains to things like war. But this podcast, Unregistered, will now be a live stream for the moment on Thursday nights at this time. And it will address contemporary issues through the scholarship and academic work that we are doing at Unregistered Academy. And that is both my own scholarly work, and I'm going to present some of that tonight, but it will also be guest lecturers, guest teachers. We've had multiple teachers at the Academy on various subjects, and these are leading world-class experts on the subject. So, for instance, our most recently, we have a course on fascism, which we had John Foote of the University of Bristol, and he is, by most accounts, the leading expert on modern Italian history, and in particular, modern fascism, Italian fascism. This podcast will be discussing the issues, the scholarly research, the various analyses that are on a higher level than what you'll find on Twitter or on, I dare say, on most other podcasts. So it will always be relevant to the news, and you will want to come here to get the deeper understanding of the history and the philosophy of what's happening right now. I will be speaking to you on this podcast and this live stream on Thursday nights by myself at times, like I will tonight, but many other times there will be an interview. So I know many people have told me they don't want me to stop interviewing people. I know that that's a favorite thing among many people. They like to see me interview people, and that will continue. It's just that it will continue with people who I think bring an academic or scholarly expertise to the issues at hand. And that's who I will be interviewing on this very channel. So, and those will be live streams as well. So that's going to be very exciting. It's very gratifying that there are so many people already here, and people are coming in, which is wonderful. So if you would like to be part of this community and this school, this learning place, I mean, there's no good synonym for a school, I found, and to learn about the things that we're doing, and most importantly, to discuss them with us and with me directly, because in every course, every live course, it's me on Zoom with you. And so we have extensive discussions after every class session and during the sessions as well. And we will tonight too. The end of this live stream will be devoted to me trying to take your questions from the chat. I did not have time to get my moderators together, but hopefully next week I'll have moderators. If you would like to be a moderator for this brand new live stream show, hit me up at thad@unregisteredproductions.com. It's an easy job. I just needed to go through the chat and pick out some interesting questions and relay them to me during the Q&A section of the live stream. All right. If you would like to be part of this community, go to unregisteredacademy.com is what I meant to say. Unregisteredacademy.com. I believe the link is in the description. I hope it's supposed to be. I am new to this streaming software, even though on Unreported, I am on it every week on Wednesdays, but Michael is the one who handles it. So I am new to this. There might be technical issues. Just pray for me. I think we have it all figured out, but just know that I am new to this platform. So we have at Unregistered Academy now 31 courses that are streaming video courses, so you can go watch them anytime you want. Just become a member and you can watch any or all of them at any time you want. Free open streaming to all members. That's both monthly members who pay monthly and annual members who pay annually. And I must say that there are now 4 days left in the Black Friday sale, Cyber Week sale, on annual memberships, 25% off. So I'd say a giant chunk, maybe a third of our students actually got their memberships during the Black Friday sale as annual members. So I strongly recommend it. Once you get that membership, you can watch all the courses immediately. And every member also will have access to all of our live courses, and those will begin on a weekly basis starting next week. I will be announcing a new course that will begin next week in the next day or two. So look out for that. If you want to be a part of our mailing list, go to unregisteredacademy.com and sign up. There's a sign up form there on every page of the site, and you'll be notified of such things. But also just check the site. Go to the site on a regular basis and you will see. But next week we'll begin live courses again. And as I said, every regular member has access to those. If you don't want to become a member and you just want to watch the courses individually, you can do that too. You can either buy them. You can buy them individually. And I will say that part of the Cyber Week sale is that the courses now, for the first time, we've never done this before, but we wanted to give people an opportunity to sample various courses. All of the courses we have put on sale through the weekend, also 25% on. So if you want to watch courses individually without becoming a member, do that. You'll see, go to the site, click on the course link, that's the Learn More box, and you will see the full course description, and you'll see the price and the discount. So that's that. If you want any business questions, I put them in the chat. As I said, I am the moderator tonight, which is a little bit tricky. The link is there. Thank you. Great. All right, guys. Thank you for what you're saying in the chat as well. I feel like, is there another business? We have the Cyber Week sale going on, unregisteredacademy.com. Annual memberships, 25% off. All individual courses, 25% off. All members get immediate access to all our streaming video courses, of which there are, I think, 31 of them. We have them in the categories of politics, U.S. history, philosophy, and geopolitics. Those are the areas of expertise that I dabble in. That I work in, I should say, and have been for 3 decades now. So I am very comfortable and have been teaching in those specific fields at elite universities since 1996. And I can list my credentials if you would like, my academic credentials for those who are new here. I have a feeling there are some people who are new here because this is more people than I was anticipating, which is lovely. But yes, so for those who don't know me, I was born and raised in Berkeley, California, to socialist Trotskyist parents in a radical milieu, left-wing milieu in the 60s and 70s. Went to a very radical hippie college called Antioch College in Ohio, where I was actually the conservative because I was a socialist. Then I went to graduate school, Columbia University, history PhD, was there for a very long time, got the PhD, published my PhD thesis as a book with Knopf on Jimmy Hoffa and the labor movement, and began teaching at Columbia in the Great Books program when I was a graduate student there. So that was in 96. I began teaching Plato, Aristotle, etc. And the Great Books course, that was an absolutely pivotal and formative experience for me intellectually. I still use the ideas that I was teaching in that course in my own current work and my own thinking about today's issues. And we have recreated that Great Book series at Unregistered Academy. We are about a third of the way through it. We have several courses. I think we're up through Aristotle now. So you can also watch those courses as a member or buy them individually. It's in the Great Book series. You'll see that on the site as well. We have Plato's Republic, we have Aristotle's Politics, and the Bible, maybe my favorite thing to teach. And we will be actually beginning tonight with a little discussion of the Bible. So that was at Columbia. Then I was hired immediately after I got my PhD at Columbia across the street at the Women's College at Columbia, which is called Barnard College, and taught there for 6 years in U.S. history, specializing in, well, I did the whole sweep. I did the whole survey of U.S. history for all the Columbia history majors and the Barnard majors. Specialized at that time in the history of race, African-American history. Got very interested in gender and sexuality during that time as well. Became the leading historian of Black drag queens, which is true. That's the academic journal article that I published in American Quarterly. It's the history of Black drag queens, but it's really about the civil rights movement and assimilation and the meaning of citizenship in America in the 50s and 60s. And I argue in that the civil rights movement was in part an attempt to eradicate the distinctiveness of Black culture. So you can check that out. We also have courses that deal with that. We're going to be rolling out another course on the history of race in America, which I taught many years ago elsewhere, but I'm going to do that soon here as well. So I taught at Barnard for 6 years. They found out about my ideas, about the arguments I was making about American history, and fired me, essentially, because of that. Essentially, you can read about that. I wrote about it in the Huffington Post, if you'd like to see the accounts of that. Then I taught at the New School for Social Research in New York for a couple of years, and then moved to Los Angeles, where I taught at Occidental College for 5 or 6 years, and then moved to Oregon, where I taught at Willamette University for 2 years. And then I realized that the academy was not for me, and I wasn't for them. It was a mutual dislike on multiple levels, and we can certainly talk about that in the Q&A if you'd like. I have all sorts of things to say about colleges and universities in the United States these days. But what I did was I 7 years ago decided I have to leave. They're not going to hire me for any tenure track permanent position anyway. So I began the podcast, got a lot of help from Joe Rogan in doing that, which greatly increased my audience and my visibility. And I'm still very grateful to Joe for that. He helped out a professor, having never gone to college himself, and built an audience. And from that began to build my own school, which is what was always my dream. I've dreamt since I was 19 years old of having my own college, because I was always dissatisfied with every college that I was a part of. I want the highest intellectual standards. I want real debate. I want the best arguments from all sides clashing, and for us all to watch it happen. I want the smartest people with every opinion to talk to each other directly and have arguments and fights and conflicts. There is no other way to learn about the key issues of the time. And so at the Academy, that's something we focus on. We always make sure to present the most intelligent, smartest sides of each issue. When I do history, in my history courses, you'll see this, I do a lot of work on historiography, which is the history of history, meaning how has history been told or taught? How have historians thought about history? How have they written about it? And I will always present the arguments, the differing interpretations of American history and world history. So that's about me. Began Renegade University also at the time of the podcast, and built many courses and had lots of students, and had to leave for various reasons. Can't go into, it's not important either. And just wanted to do my own school. That was with partners, and now I'm completely on my own. And that's what's great. So I am completely independent and free to do exactly what I want here, and that's what I'm doing. So we began the Academy 2 years ago, I think, 3 years ago. And as I said, we've been building the catalog, and we have 30-some courses, and there's more to come. All right. I hope I've covered everything. PhD in history, Columbia, specializing in U.S. history. Oh, books, forgot. Yes, right. So my first book was on the labor movement, U.S. labor history. Second book is what many people know about and many people know me from, is A Renegade History of the United States. I don't have a copy right near me. We have a course on a renegade history at the Academy, also multi-part course. A lot of fun to teach that one. So if you are a fan of that book or you want to get a video version of the book, that's the thing to do. Let's see. And then I'm working on, then I guess we'll finish here. My current book project is, I've been saying this for a while. I know a lot of you have heard me say this and it's embarrassing, but it's true. I really do have just about a half a chapter left to write, but it is an epic, massive, sprawling history of the relationship between America and the rest of the world. So it's not just about American foreign policy, although that's half the book. It's also about the place and the influence and the effects of American popular culture in its diffusion around the world over the last 200 years. So I have had to learn a lot about many, many different countries, as well as about the American government and U.S. foreign policy. It's been an incredible experience, but that's why it's taken me so long. My publisher insisted that it be that big of a book. So that big of a book, if it's done well, takes a while. Anyway, I am in the closing phases of that. And that is why I have turned to geopolitics of late as one of my principal interests. And we will talk about that tonight. We will talk about geopolitics and U.S. foreign policy. Oh my God, tonight. But we will begin with the Bible, because that's where you begin when you discuss such things, don't you know? That is precisely my argument, that when you look at the world today and the United States of America abroad, its far-flung empire, and I think we should use that word. I argue, and I'm about to argue right now, as I do in the courses at the Academy, that the origins of that, the reason we have these things all over the world, these are U.S. military bases, basically currently. This is as of 4 years ago. I don't think there's been significant change since then. 800 bases outside the United States. 800 military bases outside the United States. Why is this here now? And I argue the origin is in the Bible. What do I mean by that? Well, the thinking of the men, and a few women, but mostly men, who built this empire, who put those bases all around the world and have staffed them with millions of soldiers over the years. Where do they get the premises of their worldview? They get it from here. They get it from, in particular, I argue, but it's not hard to make this argument. They get it in particular from one passage in the Gospel of Matthew. But the context for that is in the Old Testament in Genesis. Now, what am I getting at? How do we get from the Holy Bible to the U.S. empire in 2020? Well, in Genesis it says, "And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it." This is to the human beings. "And have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." That doesn't necessarily call for a global empire, but it certainly is an expansive, universalistic, absolutist claim about the dominion of man over all that is on earth. But then, when you go to the New Testament, the Christian Bible, and in particular the Gospel of Matthew, evangelical people who have called themselves evangelical Christians over the last 100 or so years, 200 years, have identified this particular passage as being the fulfillment or logical culmination of what was said in Genesis. This is Jesus to his disciples. He says, "Then the 11 disciples went away into Galilee, into a mountain where Jesus had appointed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and spoke unto them, saying, All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Amen. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost." Of course, this has been used as not the justification, but the injunction by Jesus to his disciples, who include modern day evangelical Christians across America, an injunction to those people to go out and convert all nations, all people, all other people in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, to make all the world Christian. This is a very common interpretation of this passage. This is nothing unusual that I'm saying. I have interviewed Christian theologians, and they agree with me. This is the evangelical injunction in the Bible. It is called this story in the Bible is called the Great Commission. Every maker of United States foreign policy since the founding of this country has been, in some way or another, an evangelical Christian. Some of you might think about Thomas Jefferson and his odd views on religion. No, Thomas Jefferson, as you will see, was steeped in evangelical Christianity in his thinking about the world in particular. But let's look at these founding fathers, fairly important figures. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about these things tonight and present these items from our courses at the Academy is that they directly address rhetoric that I hear all the time from people I otherwise very much admire, people who I think are very smart about politics, and tend to be quite sophisticated about politics. They have a very strange view of the founding fathers. They tend to believe the myth, very commonly held, by the way, that the founding fathers were isolationists. The founding fathers didn't want an American empire. Washington, didn't he give that speech in which he talked about entangling alliances? Well, that is in our course, and you will have to take that course to see how that speech is not what it's cracked up to be. But I will show you what other founding fathers said about such matters of empire, whether or not the United States should be an empire outside of North America or even on the North American plain. Should the U.S., after its founding, expand and conquer and control other parts of the world? Well, to do that, you have to go back to the Bible, I said, but you also have to go back to another of the founders' principal intellectual influences. And again, everybody agrees on this. John Locke was clearly the most important political philosopher for the founding fathers of America. And here is what John Locke, also a deeply Christian man, and his writings, his philosophy is again steeped in Christianity. If you've ever read the Second Treatise of Government, his most famous work, you will see that it is very much a derivation of Christianity, in fact. And you can see here, this is one of the key passages in it. And this has been said to have been one of the animating ideas of the United States of America, the founding of America, in fact. From here, this passage right here. John Locke says, When God gave the world in common to all mankind in Genesis, he commanded man to work, and man needed to work in order to survive. So God and his reason commanded man to subdue the earth, i.e., to improve it for the benefit of life. And in doing that, he expended something that was his own, namely his labor. A man who, in obedience to this command of God, subdued, tilled, and sowed any part of the earth's surface, thereby joined to that land something that was his property, something that no one else had any title to or could rightfully take from him. If you mix your labor with the soil of the earth, it belongs to you. This is the labor theory of property. But you can also see that here that John Locke is positing that not just as a right, you have a right to what you create with your labor. It's not just a right. As you can see here, it is also a duty and an obligation. God commanded that you subdue the earth and all that is on it, and thereby control and possess it. Now, how did the founding fathers of America think about these things? Well, here's Ben Franklin. 1751, of course, well before the American Revolution. This is when Franklin was relatively obscure young man, but this is how he was thinking about things like labor, productivity, and sovereignty, political ownership and sovereignty, the relationship between those two. Who gets to be the ruler? Who should be the ruler? Who is entitled? Who is entitled to political power? And here's what he said. The whites who have slaves not laboring are enfeebled and therefore not so generally prolific. He was a big critic of white slave owners in the South. He thought they were a bunch of lazy dogs, which they largely were. Slaves also pejorate the families that use them. The white children become proud, disgusted with labor, and being educated in idleness are rendered unfit to get a living by industry. Hence, the prince that acquires new territory, if he finds it vacant, and look at this, or removes the natives to give his own people room, the legislator that makes effectual laws for promoting of trade, increasing employment, improving land by more or better tillage, providing more food by fisheries, securing property, etc., and the man that invents new trades, arts, or manufactures, or new improvements or in husbandry, may be properly called fathers of their nation, as they are the cause of the generation of multitudes. The people who are productive with their labor, I think I'm reading this correctly, should be called and considered and treated as the fathers of their nation, which of course he became soon. And of course, what else was Franklin famous for? His very famous work ethic. All the founding fathers were big champions of the Protestant or Puritan work ethic, and that was their principal justification for why they should be considered the fathers of their nation. But you see here also what he says about the natives, and John Locke said something identical in another part of the Second Treatise. And this is something that big fans of classical liberalism, and I bet you there are some of them here right now, tend to be completely unaware of. John Locke, Ben Franklin, the founding fathers who spoke about this issue, didn't just justify the seizure of land, the conquest of the natives in America. They said it was our obligation. A Swiss philosopher named Emmer Vattel was basically the first philosopher of international relations in the 18th century, and he was a principal influence on the founding fathers, and he made this argument directly and explicitly. The natives must be removed by those who are industrious and productive. Their land must be taken by those who will make that land profitable and productive. This was the argument of classical liberals in the 18th and 19th centuries, including the founding fathers and the first presidents and the major senators in the United States. They, to a man, made this argument that it wasn't just the right of the settlers to kick the Indians off the land and take their land. It was their duty. God said so in Genesis and in the Gospel of Matthew. You are obligated to remove the unproductive from land that could be cultivated and made useful for humanity. In fact, the argument was that you are inhumane by not doing that, because we will all live in poverty, as everyone in North America did until the white settlers showed up. This is true. They lived, everyone, all the natives lived in what we would consider and what white settlers considered to be poverty. Relative material poverty, no doubt. So Locke and Franklin and the rest argued that it is for the good of humanity. It is your duty to improve humanity. And to do that, you must remove those who don't make this beautiful, wonderful, fertile land unproductive. That's the basis for the Indian Wars. That's the basis for the genocide of the native population in the 19th century in the United States. That's the basis. I'm not saying that's the only reason it happened, but that is the basis. That's the ideological and psychological, most importantly, psychological foundation for that way of thinking about what should be done to the Indians. You have to go to Christianity and then classical liberalism's derivation of Christianity to understand why these men who made those policy decisions that led to the eradication of Indians, what made them think? How did they think? You have to understand those texts, those constellations of ideas to understand why American history happened. And then let's look, but I'm sure some of you are fans of other founding fathers. Maybe John Adams. There was an HBO series about him. Very smart guy. For me, I love the founding fathers are the most interesting intellectuals in American history, easily. They're fascinating thinkers. I, of course, critique them relentlessly, but I find them all to be absolutely fascinating intellectuals, and none more than John Adams. John Adams had one of the more amazing minds you will come across in public life. Now, this is John Adams, 1755, a young man. I think he was a teacher, and he had just graduated from Harvard, I think, at this time, and was a teacher of children in a school in Massachusetts, I think, when he wrote this. But that's when he was fantasizing actively. He wrote this in his diary all the time about becoming the next Caesar and about America being the next Rome. Now, you can look at this portrait that he had made. This is right after the War for Independence. He had this portrait made of him by John Copley. He was a very famous British portrait artist. Look at that. You got to look at that portrait. That says a whole lot there. You got a globe and you got a bunch of maps. And there's a debate about this, but many people think that's Caesar in the picture on the wall. John Adams is interested in expansion. And let's look at what he says here at the very beginning of his political career. Look at what he says. If we look into history, we shall find some nations rising from contemptible beginnings and spreading their influence till the whole globe is subjected to their sway. When they have reached the summit of grandeur, some minute and unsuspected cause commonly affects their ruin, and the empire of the world is transferred to some other place. Immortal Rome rose to stupendous height, but the demolition of Carthage by removing all dangers suffered it to sink into debauchery and made it at length an easy prey to barbarians. England immediately upon this began to increase its power and magnificence, and is now the greatest nation upon the globe. Soon after the Reformation, a few people came over into this new world for conscience sake. Perhaps this apparently trivial incident meaning the revolution, the American Revolution, this is his hope, may transfer the great seat of empire into America. It looks likely to me. For if we can remove the turbulent Gallics, the French, our people, according to the exactest computations, will in another century become more numerous than England itself. That became true by the 1860s. I know it's close. Should this be the case, since we have, I may say, all the naval stores of the nation in our hands, it will be easy to obtain the mastery of the seas, and then the united force of all Europe will not be able to subdue us. The only way to keep us from setting up for ourselves is to disunite us. Divide et impera. These were global imperialists from the very beginning, from before the beginning. This is 20 years before the American Revolution even begins. He's thinking this way. And I show you in many courses at the Academy that this was their thinking throughout their political careers. But what about Thomas Jefferson? Maybe you're thinking, the Declaration of Independence certainly isn't an imperialist document, is it? Well, let's take a look at this. You all know this first section. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Okay, he's talking about rights. Rights throughout this. These are just rights. You're not obligated to overthrow anybody. You're not obligated to do regime change. You just have a right to overthrow your ruler, right? Well, people miss, this is the fourth or fifth paragraph down. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Now, that sure could be read as a justification for what we now call regime change wars in other countries. But surely Thomas Jefferson, the yeoman farmer from Virginia, the father of participatory Jeffersonian democracy, surely he wasn't calling for anything like what George Bush did. Unless you find out that when Jefferson became president, I'm sorry, let me back up here. Before this, when he was president, he said a lot of things that made it really clear what he meant by the Declaration of Independence. He says here, this is in 1780, "We shall divert through our own country a branch of commerce which the European states have thought worthy of the most important struggles and sacrifices, and in the event of peace, we shall form to the American Union a barrier against the dangerous extension of the British province of Canada and add to the Empire of Liberty," what a phrase, an Empire of Liberty, an extensive and fertile country, thereby converting dangerous enemies into valuable friends. We will take over this continent and we will convert the people living here into our friends, meaning into Americans. Again, there's more quotes where this comes from. There's a famous or infamous address that Jefferson made to a bunch of Delaware Indians in which he told them they were all going to become Americans one day. Again, that's in our courses. But then in 1804, when he's president, I confess I took to this duplication of area for the extending of a government. This is after the Louisiana Purchase. So the United States is now increased by a third or something, roughly a gigantic increase, the Louisiana Purchase in North America, right? I confess I look to this duplication of area for the extending of a government so free and economical as ours as a great achievement to the massive happiness which is to ensue. Remember, every human being who happened to live in the territory of the Louisiana Purchase, which stretched from New Orleans all the way to Canada, every human being who lived there was instantly, with a stroke of Jefferson's pen, made into an American, unless they were slaves. But everyone instantly was corralled into this nation state with all the obligations. They then could be drafted into wars, etc. They had to pay taxes eventually. And they didn't vote on it. That's empire. That's imperialist conquest. In this case, it was done by purchase, not by war. But that's empire. And this, more importantly, we see that this was in the minds of the founding fathers of America from the very, very beginning. When Jefferson became president, many people don't know this, one of the very, very first things, in fact, I think it was the first executive order he made, was to create, or really recreate, the United States Marine Corps. Yes, Thomas Jefferson is the founding father of the Marine Corps. There was a Marine Corps during the War for Independence, but it was essentially disbanded. And it was tiny anyway. He made it into like a real fighting force and a proper part of the American military. Well, what's the Marine Corps for? It's for invading other places. It's an offensive unit. It's not a defensive unit. And certainly it's never been used that way. And the very first time it was used was immediately after Jefferson took office as president. He launched what we call the Barbary Wars. And I have a whole history on that as well at the Academy. Several wars, he sent the Marines on ships all the way to the Mediterranean to Tripoli, which is now Libya. And this is a scene from a battle, one of the nastiest, bloodiest battles in these wars. The U.S. Marines landed ashore, went to war, killed a bunch of the local inhabitants, assassinated the Pasha, the king in Tripoli, and replaced him with his brother, who promised to be loyal to the United States. This was Jefferson's doing. This was Jefferson's principal foreign policy achievement. He did this immediately after taking office. He promised to do it before he took office. He always wanted to do it. This is in the Mediterranean. This is in Africa. This is in 1802, 3, and 4. This is the very beginning of the American Republic. It's Thomas Jefferson. This is global imperialism from the very beginning of the American Republic. And look what Jefferson had to say after the Barbary Wars. He said these two things. We should have such an empire for liberty as she has never surveyed since the creation, and I am persuaded no constitution was ever before so well calculated as ours for extensive empire, and this is an odd one, and self-government. So remember his construction of the Empire of Liberty about 10 years earlier? Very strange construction too. But I think in his own mind, this is what it was. It was an extensive, and he means global empire, stretching to anywhere and perhaps everywhere, but made up of citizens, I suppose, who are also yeoman subsistence farmers like Jefferson allegedly was, or that he fantasized about, who governed themselves locally, but they were part of an empire. Maybe a confederation was his imagining. But of course, that's not what happened in Tripoli. The United States went in, killed a bunch of people, installed a puppet regime, and left them there. I mean, brutal, naked, imperialist conquest. Then, at the end of his life, Jefferson says this: where this progress will stop, no one can say, meaning that the advance of the American empire. Barbarism has, in the meantime, been receding before the steady step of amelioration, and will in time, I trust, disappear from the earth. So, if you want to know why we have these military bases all over, I am trying to look to Jefferson. You have to look to Adams. You have to look to Franklin. But more importantly, you have to look to their philosophical antecedents, their intellectual influences, John Locke, and especially the Christian Bible. The injunction to make the planet productive, the injunction to uplift others, the injunction to replace those who are not productive, and the entitlement that Locke elaborated of those who mix their labor with the soil. to property rights. That is the basis of property rights in classical liberal thinking and in American thinking. But it also becomes, and this is where people miss it, this is where classical liberals, and I must say most libertarians miss this. It also contains right in the middle of it a command to conquer, a command to extend what Jefferson called the empire of liberty. And they acted on it. Jefferson did what he promised. And this is the beginning of the American empire. It is not the Spanish-American War in 1898. Many people think that's when the American empire was launched. No. Some people think it was World War II. Many people refer to 1945 as the beginning of the global American empire. No. It's not even 1802. I argue it is in 1755. It is in the years in which the founding fathers were born and raised. And all of these ideas that American and British elites were being taught at the time, that empire is good, empire is just, empire is godly. That's what they were raised with, those ideas. And so is it any wonder that they are the ones who launched a global American empire through war, conquest, and the destruction of many, many lives, but also the vast improvement of all of this land, the land I'm living on, which is California. If the Ohlone were still the ruling tribe here, there wouldn't be a house I'd be sitting in. There wouldn't be an internet connection here. There wouldn't be a computer here. But that is it. If you want to know why we have these bases all around the world, why we conquered the Indians, the intellectual and psychological basis for that is here. And that's what we try to teach at the Academy. The basis, the real basis, the deepest roots of what's going on today. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions, I suppose. We have 10 more minutes. If you guys have questions, I can try to go through the chat here. I'm also trying to get rid of this thing from my screen. Oh. Yeah. So let me take a look at the chat here. So were the Indians who wanted to mimic... I lost that. Let's go up to the front. Michael will be here. He's always going to be on Wednesday nights at Unreported. Michael's not going anywhere. I will not let him leave. And he'll probably be a part of this as well. It doesn't matter to me whether you're on YouTube or Twitter. Christopher, thank you. David Irving is dead. I would love to have him on, but he's dead now. Yep, you can buy individual courses. In fact, they are on sale without a membership. The individual courses are on sale through the weekend. You do not have to be a member. Let's see. Oh, Pamela, I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. You can you can email me at thad@unregisteredproductions.com and I'll take care of that. Okay, let's see. Greetings from Australia. We are a global, we're becoming a global empire of our own. Okay, I got it. Okay, looks like Pamela's figured it out. Awesome. Difference between fascism and Nazism. So yeah, we have an amazing course on fascism, as I mentioned, and we examine three what I consider to be fascist regimes. Italy under Mussolini, Germany under Hitler, of course, and the New Deal under Franklin Roosevelt. And so we very carefully, and I teach it with two other professors, David Beto, who's an expert on the New Deal and Roosevelt, and then, as I mentioned, John Foote, who's an expert on Italian fascism. And we very, very clearly delineate between the three, but there are obvious massive overlaps also. All right. Oh, Ben Franklin's stuff was amazing. He had quite a lot of stuff to say. That does not comport with the general mythology about Ben Franklin. Patrick Henry and George Mason. Yeah, I don't know what their thoughts were on this in particular. Oh, fascinating. All the founders are worth reading. That was my favorite thing in graduate school, was reading the founding fathers. Read the Federalist Papers, but the diaries and the letters of people like Jefferson and Adams, amazing. But they're also psychotic, by the way. Do you all know that the founding fathers were psychotic? If you put them on a psychologist or psychiatrist couch today, I guarantee you they would be classified by the DSM as psychotic. Delusional, narcissistic, megalomaniacal, really something. You should read John Adams' diary about ruling the world and deciding who would have what job and what position in society. And oh boy, just incredible psychosis. I mean that. But they're adorable psychotics, and I appreciate that. They're our psychotics, I should say. Washington, I have a whole section on Washington. What was George Washington's job before he was a general? Anyone know? What did he do? What was his occupation besides being a farmer, meaning a slave owner? What did he actually do before he was a soldier? He was a surveyor, a land surveyor of Western lands. He would take his little spyglass and he would point it to the west from Virginia out over the forests and draw maps. He would draw maps, then he would get on his horse, and then he would organize a militia of maybe 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 other men on horses with rifles, maybe some slaves, and they would set off to draw the map that Washington had surveyed, and then conquer that land, seize that land, claim ownership of it, and then eventually call it American. That's what George Washington first did. There's also some great stuff about his attitude toward the French and the Indians in the French and Indian Wars. He was all about killing them as quickly as possible and taking their land. All right. Anything else? What other courses do we have? We got Fascism. World War II is probably the most popular course, and you should watch the trailer. It's pretty cool. That course will get me into the most trouble, probably. Although we also have the course on American slavery, in which I put forward my very infamous argument about American slavery. Those who know my book will be familiar with what I'm talking about. I will not spoil the surprise for now. New comments. World War I. Yes, indeed. Yes, World War I, of course, is also foundational and pivotal, and that's covered in multiple courses as well. Manifest Destiny, yes, extends all the way to the Pacific, and that's a slide I didn't show you guys, but of course, Manifest Destiny, the thinking, the ideology of Manifest Destiny comes right out of biblical interpretations and classical liberalism. Straight out of it. That's Manifest Destiny is just a further elaboration of what I'm talking about. Exactly. Talking shit. Great question. That was a course at Renegade University. That was one of my very favorites. And that's in fact how I met Michael Weimer, because he was a student. He took that course when I didn't know him. He just bought the course and took it, and that's how I met him. And the rest is history. That was years ago. But yeah, it's a history of African American culture, and I co-teach it with Kamasi Hill, who's a PhD in African American history, and it's pretty cool. We should redo that. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Thank you, Sean Donovan. Appreciate that very much. All right, it's 5 o'clock. I think it's time to go, unless there's another question anyone has. But check out unregisteredacademy.com. And if you have any questions, hit me up. There's an email address at the bottom of every page on our site. Ask me questions if you need any help. Gotcha, Melissa. I hear you. But you know what? Why don't you send me an email about which course you'd like to take, and we can talk. All right, guys. Very much appreciate this. Unregistered is back. We will have interviews with guests soon. And look out very soon for the announcement for the next live course. In the meantime, check out our website. Thank you for coming. Great audience. I didn't expect this many people to be here. I'm really, really thrilled and excited about that. Really didn't expect that. So this is great. And thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. And I will see you next week. We are just beginning. Peace.